Hey guys, what's going on? Steve, I'm back again, and I'm back with another Warhammer fantasy video this time. So this is going out to all of you Warhammer fantasy fans out there before I got changed over to Age of Sigmar. So I used to play both 40k and fantasy. I think my biggest fantasy armies were, I could probably do about 3 to 4,000 points worth. I mean, I could probably stretch it even a little bit more if I really upgraded, like, everything. Would be dwarves and chaos. Warriors of chaos. Yeah, I could probably stretch chaos a little bit more than I could have dwarves. You know, because there's so many things they could have done. You could have done with Warriors of Chaos, you know, mark of this, mark of that, mark of, you know, this weapon, this talisman, on all these, you know, different things. And of course I had Archeon, who was like 1,200 points or something like that. So, I mean, right there alone is a big chunk. I think he was like 1,200 points. I mean, fully decked out, I think. I don't remember, this was so long ago, but he was a very expensive model to take back then. Then, of course, I did have some smaller armies, you know, 1,000 points-ish. I think I had Ogres, Tomb Kings, and what else did I have? Ogres, Tomb Kings, and I think I had some Skaven. Yeah, I think I had some Skaven. They were just kind of funny, you know, kind of fun to play, you know, rattling guns and stuff like that. And Giselles, those things were ridiculously overpowered. The ridiculous range they had, and then like basically like killed on twos, you know. Yeah, those were insane. But the rattling guns, seeing those things misfire and being like, uh-oh, misfired. Which direction does it roll? Oh, it fires directly into my own unit. Oh boy. But they were fun to play. But yeah, that's pretty much what I played in fantasy. So I go both good or bad, depending on what was needed for, you know, because the store used to run events and stuff like that. So if one side was outnumbered, you know, there's more players on the good side than the bad, then okay, well, I'll bust out, you know, my chaos and stuff like that, and kind of even the teams a little bit. So yeah, gave me the flexibility. Alright, so anyways, let's get into the video. This is every Warhammer Fantasy faction explained. This is by the channel Pancreas No Work, and this is going to be part 1. I'm going to split this video up into a couple of parts because it is about an hour long. Alright, so yeah, let's jump right in, shall we? Here we go.
Controversial statement. I like when people get into Warhammer. It's always a joy to have more people to play with and interact with in the hobby space. It's a new chance for me to try and convert someone, anyone, into accepting that the Eldar are actually really cool and interesting, and please just for 5 minutes stop saying elf bad. But speaking of elves, every time there's a wave of people that first learn about Warhammer, there's always one thing in common with them. None of them realize there's more to Warhammer than Space Marines, Tyranids, and spikier Space Marines. There's a whole other pair of settings that also exist, and they just fly right under the radar half the time.
Which is kind of sad, because they did have some really good models.
GW ended it, but then it came back. And if you don't want to, you don't even have to collect thousands of dollars of minis to play with this one. Kind of. Warhammer Fantasy has been around longer than even 40k. It's had its ups, it's had its downs. It got blown up for a little bit, but thanks to Total War, Vermintide, and the constant nagging of the community, you can once again play in the old world. With elves, dwarves, and humans.
Yeah, because I never understood, like, Age of Sigmar.
Such as magical frogs,
it's like, oh, this
rats,
is the Grand Order of Alliance.
Like, know about them.
What the hell is that?
Not nearly enough people learn that the setting is even a thing. So I'm
Grand
going to be doing
Order
my
of, like, chaos and destruction.
I'm going to learn you all about every faction of Warhammer Fantasy. Some of them had extensive army lists and plot relevance, some of them languished when unupdated army books for years on end, and some of them until recently were relegated to about 3 pages of background lore. Doesn't matter, we're doing it all. If you can conceivably consider it an actual faction, they'll be here. Think of it as a companion to this video. That one was me trying to overview the setting as a whole, and this one is about the groups of people in the setting. So let's dive into a world of fantasy, and see what all that nonsense about them having the Warhammer is all about. But
Yeah,
you're
because they
about
had
to
some
start
really
listening to me
good
list off all
models and
kinds of
stuff.
factions.
You
And
know?
do you know what you could be listening to me with? Raycon and their Everyday Earbuds, the sponsor of this video. Raycon's Everyday Earbuds are some of the finest available on the market, and they've got a new and improved version just to go that extra mile.
And I guess
Let's just
even
get
Age
right
of
into the features of
Sigmar
these bad boys.
does
Multi-point
have,
connectivity, so if you and
you know,
someone else
really
want to
cool
share the
looking
music,
models
you
and stuff.
can
It's
with
kind of a
no
shame they just,
problems. Active noise cancellation,
Warhammer
because sometimes
Fantasy
the
just
outside
doesn't
world just
get
needs to take a step back for a bit.
the love
And a
that
new sleek
40K
ergonomic
does,
design to
you
make them
know?
look and feel
I
better
mean,
than
I
ever
get,
before. It's
you
even
know,
got a cool
40K
protective
has
case to keep
the
them nice and safe. I've got them
grim,
colored in a
dark
nice purple
setting,
in
even though it
Galaxy's
kind of
blue
really
case.
hasn't
Got a
felt
nebula on it and
too
everything. It's nice. You can get them in other
grim,
options though. There's
dark
plenty of colors to choose from. You know what's
lately.
better than
You know,
that?
I haven't
A
heard
32-hour
anything
battery life that gets 9
lore-wise of
minutes
like,
of battery
wow,
for 10 minutes of charging. I forget to charge my
that's
headphones pretty often,
disturbing.
and combined
You
with my
know,
complete and
so,
utter lack
but either
of
way, it
patience,
still
that's
has
usually a
that.
bad
Where
thing. But the
fantasy,
Everyday Earbuds got my back. You can just charge them
not
up
so
for a little
much,
bit, and they're
you
good
know?
to go. I use them when I'm painting or assembling minis. It's nice and relaxing, and the sound quality lets me tune out the world and
Wouldn't
get
make
into the
for good
swing of
shows,
things.
though.
This is good because, as you can see, I have a lot
You
of
know,
minis to
could
work
do
on.
some
But even with your own shopping needs, you can
shows. I
still
mean,
enjoy the Raycon Everyday Earbuds. Click the
I don't know
link in
what
the
they'll do with the
description or
Amazon
buy
stuff, if they'll actually go to fans.
raycon.com/fantasy. Get
Well,
15% off your Raycon
I think they
purchase,
said
plus
for the
free shipping.
Amazon
They're already
deal,
half the
it
price
was
of
for
other
40K
brands, and with my
first, and if
link, you can get them at an
40K
even better price.
shows and
Specify you
movies
listen to music,
succeed,
podcasts, and more
then
with
they will
Raycon's Everyday Earbuds.
consider giving
Now
them
then,
the
let's talk
fantasy
about where it
setting,
all
which would be
began.
kind of cool.
That's orc spelled with a C, by the way, not a K. But across the board, the greenskins of Warhammer Fantasy aren't that different from the ones in 40k, which is why we're
Right.
starting with them. They like to fight, they're mushroom people, they're green. If you took an orc from 40k and put him in a greenskin tribe in Fantasy, he probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Might wonder why no one has a decent shooter hanging around, but he'd be content with his life regardless. He might even be
Which
happier
one's the big
because
boss?
these orcs have characters like Grimgor instead of Gaskull. There are no thinking and tactics for Grimgor, only beating everything near him to death. The greenskins used to have some pretty different lore, being closer to D&D than anything else. They had half-orcs, and they didn't reproduce with mushroom spores. Then as time went on, that was moved away from, and eventually we came to where
See,
we are
I
now in
missed
the
the
old
rank and
world. That being
file
that the orcs hopped a ride with the old ones' ships when they came to the Warhammer Fantasy
setting,
world. More on
you
that
know?
later. From there, they naturally began spreading out across the entire world. The old ones and their servants did their best to get rid of the orcs, as they did all other races they weren't quite fond of. But you
Lizardmen
can't
had
get
some
rid of
really
the
cool
orcs once they're on a
models.
planet. It's just not possible. So nowadays, if you wander around a given area long enough, chances are you'll find some greenskins kicking about, making things worse for whoever lives there. The orcs themselves are one of the biggest similarities between the two settings. The biggest guy's in charge of the tribe, and if you
Yep.
get a real big boss, he might be in charge of multiple tribes. And
Right.
when you get a really big boss, you could get a whole proper WoW going. When this happens, you usually get a whole lot of dead humans and dwarves.
Oh,
Painting
yeah.
something red still makes it go faster, painting it blue makes it luckier, and can block arrows from killing the blue-painted orc. And they still love looting. Not nearly as much as in 40k, but you can always
Still
find
haven't
an
seen
orc in a
anything
tribe
purple.
wearing dwarf plate armor, or wielding a human greatsword he grabbed off a corpse. They do have some more savage brethren who judge other orcs for using things like basic tools, or digging a pit to shit in rather than just letting it drop where you stand, but aside from being a bit more magical, those orcs aren't really all that different. Where you get the biggest change, though, is with the goblins. See, in 40k, grots are an entire species of plot irrelevance to the orcs. You'll get one like Makari once in a blue moon, who are allowed to be in the shadow of the spotlight of a far more famous orc, but the goblins in fantasy aren't actually
Yeah, they
threat
had
all
their
by
own
themselves.
little army.
Sure, they're still
They had those,
cowardly and will refuse a stand-up fight unless they outnumber the enemy 40 to 1. Sure, they're still
Shoot,
kicked
what are
around
those
by
things
the orcs
called
and are
that-
used to do
that
all the
spin around with
manual
those
construction
balls,
stuff. And sure, they're still slightly
I
smarter
can't
than
remember
the
what they're
orcs,
called.
so anything resembling any actual construction or research is done by them. But every now and then, not often, but every now and then, you get a goblin who's a cut above the rest. And when that happens, everyone's in trouble. The goblins are cunning little buggers. They know in a straight-up fight they're gonna lose, so they'll wait till the biggest orc around is sleeping and slit his throat. Or poison his food, or convince him there's something shiny in a nearby cave filled with hungry trolls. And sometimes, if they're really insane, they'll overdose on literally magic mushrooms, and when they come back to reality, they've slaughtered every orc in charge in a manic frenzy. Now instead of a big green
That's
moron who
kinda
just
crazy.
about knows which way is forward leading the army, you have someone like Skarsnik leading an orc army. A green little Sun Tzu who's gonna run circles around you and your entire military. Or you can get one that pretty much just lucks into the position, like Grom the Paunch, hallowed be his girth.
yeah.
Instead of being clever, he just got incredibly lucky and was forced to eat troll meat. Instead of exploding, which is normally what happens when you do that, he just kept growing alongside it. 3 things happened. 1. He got so incredibly fat he'd beat rival orcs by sitting on them. 2. He became a legend among goblins everywhere. The alpha male fantasy they all wish they could be. And 3. He nearly ended the world by sailing from the equivalent of the Middle East or Africa to the middle of the Atlantic and destabilizing the High Elves. If you like
Really?
drops but wish they could, do anything
wow.
important ever, maybe take a look at the goblins. Their
That's
history really
pretty
isn't anything
impressive.
special though, mostly because they're greenskins and what you see is what you get. Usually, they beat each other up. Every now and again, one of them beats up enough orcs that he convinces them all to go beat someone else up instead. This continues until that war boss is killed, and then the orcs disband and go back to beating each other up again. Some evil dwarfs like to use them as slaves, and when they tried to make bigger, stronger, and smarter orcs to use as slaves, they immediately learned why that was a bad idea when the orcs revolted. If you like being mean and green, you'll like the orcs. And one crucial thing I nearly forgot, they love to dance. Wurzag may be the prophet of the orc gods first, but he's a hell of a dancer second. Now let's get out of the realm of similarities and into some things fantasy really does have fun.
Lizard man.
When the old ones
yeah.
showed up, the planet they arrived on was ideal for creating the ultimate weapon to fight chaos. Of course, they still had to create it. So to do that, they started by moving the planet closer to the sun to warm it up, which pissed off a lot of things on it, like the dragons. Speaking of, there were a lot of races on the planet that wouldn't really like to share the room with the Old Ones' creations. So to help them with the legwork, as well as get rid of all those fellas, the Old Ones created the Lizardmen. They also created most of the other playable races in the setting, so unless otherwise stated,
Lizardmen were
assume
very
all these
cool.
factions started out as
some of the
test
models
tube
were
babies of
pretty
the Old
badass
Ones in
looking.
one way or another. The Lizardmen were not this ultimate weapon against chaos, although they were still pretty good at fighting. You know how I said the orcs resisted extermination by the Old Ones? That was just them who managed it. Everyone else fell under a tide of angry lizards, dinosaurs, or angry lizards riding dinosaurs. With that small little bit of genociding out of the way, the Old Ones set about making the world fit their needs. The Lizardmen were their chief assistants, and to be the best secretaries they could possibly be,
So kind of
the
just
Old
like
Ones made them in
40K,
several different
the Old
flavors.
Ones,
All of them with a dash of
made some
Mesoamerican
armies.
cultures thrown in, because if you have the option to have Aztec lizard riding dinosaurs, you have no good reason not to take it. First you have the Slan. The Slan are the best wizards in all the world. They may be big fat toad people, but the first generation ones were the ones who changed the entire planet's orbit, moving around where it needed to be in space. Moving down the generational line, they did get weaker, but that's highly relative. Second generation Slan could only cause entire mountain ranges to suddenly appear at the drop of a hat. These were the Lizardmen who directly worked with the Old Ones and delivered their messages and will to the rest of them. Next you have the Saurus. Stupid people might think that since the Lizardmen are a Bronze Age civilization at best, they're not much of a threat. Then an 8-foot-tall monster from the Cretaceous period clubs you to death with an obsidian axe, and you find out just how the Saurus were able to depopulate an entire planet. These were the generals of the Lizardmen armies. They were bred for war and only war. They're pretty straightforward, and all their characters have the same background of bred to kick ass, but this is Warhammer. That's a feature, not a bug, and they break it down to its simplest possible form. Next are the Skinks. They're little chibi gecko axolotl things that do the day-to-day management of Lizardman society. You
Little
need to build a
blow darts
planned
and
out or
stuff.
to do basic diplomacy, you send the Skinks. They're also skirmishers. When the trees start speaking great planese, it's the Skinks doing it. They've even got their own god all to themselves, Sotek. It was a bit of a controversy when he came around at first, but the rest of the Lizardmen seemed content enough to let him be worshipped. Finally, we have the Croxagores. They're alligator men. They
Yeah,
build
he was
buildings
fun to
and
play
gator
as in
death
Total
roll
War
over enemy
Warhammer.
armies. That's it, but that's all they need to do. When Chaos first came and the Old Ones fled, the Lizardmen had to figure out how to not only survive, but continue the Old Ones' work in their absence, which they kind of, sort of have been pulling off a little bit. They held off the invasion at the cost of almost all the first Slan and most of their spawning pools, turning them into a very numerically disadvantaged race. Not that this stops them from still sometimes rampaging across the world, but they are largely held up in the jungles of Lustria nowadays, also known as South America, because Warhammer Fantasy is just Earth if someone with really shaky hands drew a map of it. They're isolationists, the Slan
Pretty
will spend
much.
centuries at a time meditating on the few plaques the Old Ones have left, and they really hate when tourists come to Lustria because it's usually to steal those plaques. They're all gold, you see, because gold doesn't tarnish or rust. Convenient for writing things down in
Gotta
a
get that
jungle, less
gold.
convenient when all the warm bloods come to steal the shiny stuff. If you see a Lizardman army, you're either screwed because the Great Plan dictates your death, or screwed because you're somewhere they don't think you should be. Very simple faction, but again, that's a positive. Sometimes being dino-brained is the way to go.
The Empire
Also
of
known as the
Man.
Imperium, but not as awful. These guys are the default protagonist faction. They're the strongest nation of men in the world, and that's no meaningless boast here, because there's actual competition they have in that department, unlike the Imperium. They formed about 2,500 years prior to the setting's modern day, when a pretty cool dude named Sigmar was born. Sigmar had a dream. uniting the scattered tribes of barbarians.
I like how there's
into
like
one
theories
unified
like, oh,
nation of
Sigmar's like
mankind
one of
to
the lost
drive back the
Primarchs
darkness
or
and
something
bring
like
peace
that.
to the land. He did this chiefly by beating up everyone who disagreed with him, but in fairness, most of them deserved it. If this sounds familiar, let me just remind you that this guy was here first. Plus, Sigmar realized that outright killing everyone just because they disagree with you is perhaps a bad idea that will lead to problems later down the line, so he settled for only beating them up. Sigmar didn't just beat up people, though. He also beat up a lot of orcs. Like, a whole lot of orcs. So many orcs that the dwarfs swore eternal friendship with mankind, because if Sigmar is so kick-ass, surely the rest of humanity can't be that bad either. He united most of the tribes of man in the area.
Dwarves like...
Better believe I'll come back to the most later. And
pretty
formed
impressive.
the Empire of Man. 50 years later, he just up and left.
We want to be friends with
became
you
a god, and the Empire soon
forever.
worshipped Sigmar as the chief god of their pantheon. The Empire is pretty unique as far as fantasy factions go. Usually a fantasy setting will reach the medieval era, and then very explicitly never move past that for the next trillion years of its history.
Right.
The Empire isn't
They
like that.
did.
When Sigmar was doing his thing, it was barely the Iron Age. The dwarves giving them steel weapons.
Because they got
every now
gunpowder
then
and
was
steam
considered the
tanks
height
and
of
stuff like that,
technological
and
advancement.
cannons and
Nowadays,
mortars.
2,500 years later, the Empire has tanks.
Yep.
Good tanks? Yeah. Look, for a Renaissance age civilization, tanks are pretty damn
Hey, in
impressive.
Total
no matter
War
how
Warhammer,
good
those
they
things are
actually
pretty
are.
beefy
They
and
have
pretty
factories,
badass.
mechanical horses, and countless other things that make you wonder if the book you're reading was put in the fantasy section by mistake. They also have wizards who scam people out of $50 for the thrill of it, politicians who constantly need to be wrangled by the one competent guy in the entire government, and enough floppy hats to arm the entire Holy Roman Empire with. They're still normal people, though. The three things that make the Empire great aren't genetically modified super soldiers, or lost technological secrets from a golden age, or even the direct intervention of their gods. It's faith, steel, and gunpowder. A
There you
whole
go.
lot of each. Give a man a halberd, a cause to fight for, and his friends by his side, and it turns out you can push back even the most determined of evil murder Vikings time and time again. Most Warhammer fantasy books follow the Imperial characters around, and you get a good feel for just how fleshed out this land is through them. You've got the Heartlands, sure, places like Altdorf, where it's interconnected with the wider world, magic runs through the very city through its colleges of magic, and elves and dwarfs can be seen regularly. Then you have backwater shitholes like Ostermark, where the people are outnumbered by everything nearby that wants to kill them, and guns are still a scary black magic invention for a good half the population. Or Averland, whose most noticeable trait is that they hunt halflings for sport there. There's halflings in the Empire, by the way. They can vote on the next emperor because they baked a previous one a really good meal. They also had a
See, it
civil
would be
war over
really
pie.
cool
Don't
for
be
a
halfling in Averland.
fantasy
You're
show.
gonna decorate someone's mantelpiece sooner or later. Of course, this is still Warhammer, fantasy or not. Sure, I said it's not as awful as the Imperium, but it
Right.
still has witch hunters who will burn you alive for being a wizard, or being a mutant, or just for being a bit too ugly, because that's also a sign of chaos mutation. And it's still a Renaissance age civilization. For
Kinda
90%
sucks.
of people, this means
You're
it's a
pretty
medieval
ugly.
civilization, but
I think
you
you're
might see
chaos
more pretty
tainted.
statues and paintings than your ancestors did. You're still probably going to die of the water making you poop too much. They're bordered by the undead, beastmen are everywhere once you leave the city limits, and worst of all, they have people who have sex with horses for neighbors. The Empire is constantly on the defense. From
Wait,
orcs,
what?
from chaos, from beastmen, which are a different kind of chaos, and really anyone else who's feeling a bit bored that day. But the average citizen of the Empire will do their part to keep the hordes at bay, and at the end of the day, they did this for 2,500 years until the authors decided reality itself had to go, which is a pretty good track record. They're a human, relatable nation, like if the Imperial Guard got to actually be the main characters of 40K instead of Space Marine 9001, model on sale now for $60. It's grounded, with people having normal struggles, but also fantastical, with wizards and monsters being everywhere. They do have one ultimate ace in the hole, though, the reigning emperor, Karl Franz.
Yeah.
The best statesman in the old world, the guy who wields the Warhammer. You know the one, the actual real
Rabute
Warhammer
Gilliman.
logo. That's his, and he's very good
Kinda.
at using it. He's the kind of politician who could convince you into giving him everything you own and leave you thinking you got the better deal, but also the kind of person who wouldn't do that to you. He's got everyone's interest at heart, and overall, this guy's the best emperor in Warhammer. Not Warhammer Fantasy, Warhammer in general. Kiss my ass, corpse worshippers. This one can walk, talk, and beat you to death in the name of the Empire. If you like relatable folk with a touch of the fantastic, Sigmar and his
that's
people have your
low.
back. But
That's
I did say
low.
most tribes are united by Sigmar. Unfortunately, a couple weren't able to be integrated for one reason or another. Let's talk about the one that I like first.
Kislev.
Kislev is all of Eastern Europe thrown into a pot and mixed to boiling until it coagulated into one Slavic specialty stew. They live in a frozen hellhole, which is also their country's greatest defense. They wear thick fur pelts. They have winged hussars. They also squat in the middle of a battlefield.
the winged
because such is
hussars
the natural state of
arrived.
the Kislevite. and vodka. Even the dwarfs and their genetically ingrained alcoholism respect the drinking skills of a Kislevite. Kislev's job in the setting is to face tank chaos invasions before they get to the Empire of Man, which they do pretty well. Half their cities are torn down in the process, but they're a hardy bunch. They walk
That
into
kinda
the winter
sucks,
snow,
like,
and
being the
whenever
first line
occupying
defense
their
against
land freezes
chaos.
to death, come back in and rebuild.
Ugh.
The religion is different from the Empires and they view them as weak Southerners, but the two nations are still staunch allies. Mostly because when the forces of actual hell are your neighbors, anyone else is going to be a good friend. They're led by the Tsar or Tsarina of Kislev, because GW was worried you wouldn't understand which region this place is based off of. Many times, and indeed the last one before the world blew up, this was an ice witch, a handy person to have running your country when a raging blizzard is considered a mild day. You still can't play as Kislev in the old world, thank you GW for that extreme blue balling, but they had some pretty heavy redesigns and a lot of the marketing for the old world.
But at least you can in Total War
Here's
Warhammer.
hoping GW realizes that winged hussars riding bears is something people are interested in. Shame that sentence needs to be said. I don't know why anyone would ever need to be told that. Blah. These are those
Britonia.
people who have sex with horses. When Sigmar was uniting everyone, they refused to join him, because obviously they were too good to join him. Did they have some super special magical secret, or a technology that could let them surpass the fledgling empire, or some other race in the whole? No, but they copied the elves' homework and our French, so they decided they were too good to shack up with a future god and went it alone. Britonia looked at all the cool advancements the empire was making, how it was a dynamic nation in a genre that usually gets to the medieval era and then freezes like it's going into cryo-sleep, and said no, we will not be doing that. We will be staying as medieval land. It is mandated by the government that technology will not advance, that society will never have any major
We will stay with
upheavals, and that
horses
everything
and
is just
peasants.
perfect the way it is. It's like that old decree the Pope made that declared crossbows were a blasphemous weapon, taken to be an entire society's philosophy. Britonia is all about knights. Baby knights proving themselves.
Although the
magical
Green
knights
Knight is
defending
really
the realm
cool.
and saving damsels, knights leading the country to further the goals and interests of the rest of the knights. Imagine King Arthur. That's it. Just imagine King Arthur stretched out to be a whole faction. The in-universe justification is that they saw high elf cavalry and just ran with the concept. Out of universe, it's just King Arthur and every medieval stereotype thrown together. You could, admittedly, say the same thing about the Empire and the Holy Roman Empire, or Kislev in Eastern Europe, but those are eras and places fantasy writers don't usually copy wholesale, so they get a pass from me. Britonia is the
Fair
land of
enough.
almost every fantasy setting ever conceived since Lord of the Rings, and it shows. Unfortunately, they can afford to do all of this fantasy stasis, because an elf goddess is playing them like a fiddle. Their precious Lady of the Lake, also known as the Elf Goddess of Magic, chooses some super special knights to become Grail Knights.
Oh,
they sip from her
yeah,
chalice
the Lady
of
of the Lake.
bathwater, and when the now Grail Knight emerges, they're like supercharged D&D paladins. Bullets are an inconvenience, their armor is magically toughened, and their mounts never tire, so until the Empire invents the Gatling gun, they're able to keep being aggressive backwater dickweeds. In older lore they were tolerable, but
Okay,
in
then.
modern lore someone must have felt they weren't angsty enough and made them nice and extra oppressive. The peasants are honored if the noble allows them to have 3 pennies a week instead of 2, ladies who aren't magical are property because medieval times, and social mobility is a punchline. I hope you like medieval
trebuchets,
medicine. The Empire's medicine already isn't that great. Bretonian medicine is the kind of thing that has a 300% fatality rate. And horses. Everyone has a horse. Even the lowliest peasants have a horse. A horse that more often than not eats and lives better than they do. I like horses, but I don't like them that much. If you've ever been to medieval times and made that your entire personality, Bretonia's a good faction for you. Because God is real and hates me, they're also one of the starter factions of the old world, so getting into Warhammer Fantasy nowadays is pound for pound fairly
okay.
easily
Yeah,
done with
because some of the
Bretonia.
armies
In all
disappeared.
honesty, pick them if you like them. It is on some level cool, because for as much shit as I was giving them for being generic and bland knights, knights are cool. There's a reason every 5-year-old wants to be a knight and not a Landsknecht. I mean, for God's sakes, just trying to say that word is difficult. The other army GW has refused to put onto the tabletop despite already having a direct hand in reworking them for Total War. Did you know there's a fully fleshed out Cathayan army book for GW developed? You can't have it because funds not allowed. This is a shame because Cathay is awesome. Dragons are also awesome. Cathay agrees because they're
That would be
ruled by
kinda
immortal
cool.
dragons,
Would
who
be
the
cool to
Cathayans
see 'em as an
follow
army.
every whim. Fantasy China is a magical place and one of the few places in the entire planet that might not be a terrible one to live in. Every now and again, it does what actual China used to do and implodes, and sure, those ruling dragons get along like all siblings do, i.e. barely at all, but in day-to-day life, not a bad place. And it always comes back together after imploding, usually after Mommy and Daddy Dragon come back to kick everyone's heads in until they start behaving again. It is, like I said, just fantasy medieval China.
And
but
those
that is a
stone
compliment.
giants.
You know those terracotta soldiers?
Yeah, terracotta
What if they were
soldiers.
animated by magic
Those
and
would be
also
kinda
100
cool
feet
to see
tall?
on the tabletop.
Are you a 40K fan? Imagine if the Primarchs weren't utter morons and failures almost to a man. Because that's Cathay. Again, for reasons I will never understand,
Damn.
we don't have them yet in tabletop. But Total War does, and by God is it fun to play as Cathay. The Silk Road was prosperous in real life, and it's prosperous
it's fun
in
to
Warhammer.
play as them in Total War.
So when they finally come out, prepare to show the world why China was for a good 1,000 years the most prosperous country on the planet. It's even better here because this Great Wall has magical dragon ladies guarding it. Oh, Cathay is also near the countries of Nippon, Ind, and Koresh. Nippon is Japan, Ind is India, and Koresh is Southeast Asia. I'm not giving them their own spots because no one cares about them, and I can't bring myself to either. That's it for the non-chaotic living humans, but that doesn't mean we're done talking about humans. The next few ones just don't have a heartbeat. Or skin.
Alright, so this is where I will call it for part 1. I'll end with Cathay. And I'll start up with Vampire Counts next. So there we go. There's the first couple of armies and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, lots of cool stuff. Your Greenskins, the Lizardmen, the Empire, Kislev, Bretonnian, and Cathay. Kind of a shame, you know, Cathay and Kislev, you know, didn't actually have, you know, tabletop armies and stuff like that. But at least you did get to play as them in Total War Warhammer, which I have. Wasn't a big fan of Kislev and stuff like that. They're hybrid, you know, shooting melee units and stuff like that. I like my units either melee or shooting. You know, that's just me. Because it's kind of like, all right, how do I kind of use these guys? Like, all right, should I keep these guys in the back? But they're also like melee, so should they go on the front? Like, you know, that's just me. But yeah, Cathay and stuff like that. I did play as them. Really cool playing as like the dragons and stuff. Would be cool to see them on the tabletop. Yeah. Bretonnians, never played as them, you know, on a tabletop. Although the Green Knight did look really cool. He had a really badass looking model and stuff like that. The Empire of Man, pretty straightforward right there. Can't really go wrong with that. Lizardmen, I think I was thinking about playing as them because they were pretty interesting, you know, dinosaurs and stuff like that. Some of their models looked awesome, you know, seeing like Triceratops and T-Rexes and stuff like that. But yeah, never got around to it, which is, you know, kind of a shame. I think they were probably one of the armies I was thinking of doing because I know for 40k, I was thinking about starting a Necron army next, right before Games Workshop closed down the store for whatever reason. So yeah, I think it was for 40k. I know it was Necrons that I was about to play, and it might have been Lizardmen for fantasy that I was thinking about playing. I was probably like just researching the army book, and okay, so I can get one of those, a couple of these guys, a couple of units of these. All right, that'd be like a 1,500 point army. Okay, that worked. You know, that works for me. But yeah, I think that's what I was doing, and then of course Greenskins, straightforward. Orcs and goblins. Goblins are kind of crazy. I didn't know that really too much about goblins, how sneaky and stuff like that they were. So yeah, there we go. This has actually been pretty fun. You know, going down the Warhammer Fantasy route, you know, once again, you know, because it is kind of a shame. You know, they ended that and did the Old World. I mean, Age of Sigmar. Trying to see if I can pull up, you know, Age of Sigmar stuff, because even Age of Sigmar, they do have some really cool armies, models and stuff like that. But yeah, I just never understood like how they, like the lore. Shot by Alliance, do you want to do order, death, chaos, or destruction? Like what? And then under order, Sigmar's Daughters of Cain, Deepkin, Caradon Overlords, like what? Seraphon, Stormcast Eternals, Sylvaneth? Like what? I don't understand, like what is Sylvaneth? Is alright, that's Wood Elves. Daughters of Cain, that's That's Dark Elves. Why are they under all armies of order? Like, what? Huh? Like, see, I don't... Seraphon, the Lizardmen, the Deepkin. I have no idea what those are. Yeah, see, I don't know what this stuff, what happened. Like, all armies of death, flesh eater, course, night haunts, bone reapers, and grave lords. Chaos. All right, well, that's pretty straightforward. Chaos. Although Skaven under Chaos is kind of interesting. I don't know. Destruction. Ogre Maw Tribes. Auric War Clan, son of Behemoth. Yeah, see, I don't know what happened in this Age of Sigmar stuff. I don't know. I just like old fantasy. But either way, not gonna, knock the models and stuff like that. Even looking at Warhammer the Old World, seeing like the steam tank and stuff like that. It's actually really awesome. Flagellants, the archers and stuff like that. Oh, the great swords. Those things were really good. Those things were powerful. Dwarven mountain holds. Here we go. Yeah, we got the dwarves. Okay. Yep, gyrocopters. The miners. Yep, I had the cannon and the organ gun. Those are pretty cool. I never had any slayers, though. I was kind of disappointed. I wish it did do some slayers. Doomseekers. Yeah, never did slayers. Iron breakers. There we go. Oof. Ooh. $85. Wow. Okay. Jesus. But yeah, I loved my Iron Breakers. Those things were so good. No matter what they got into combat with, yeah, that army, that unit, whatever you threw at them, that was it. They weren't moving for the rest of the game. It was game over. They were locked in combat. Ungrim Iron Fist, I had him. Grudge Thrower, had one of those as too. Yeah. Bugman's cart. Oh my god. I did have a Bugman. I did have a Joseph Bugman model. Good times. Alright, so anyways, there we go. There is part 1 of every single Warhammer Fantasy faction explained. That was really cool. I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of the video. Getting into, what do we got? Vampire counts and yeah, Tomb Kings. Border Princes and stuff like that. The Elves. Dwarves. Oh yeah, Chaos Dwarves. Yeah, the Hell Cannon, stuff like that. Ogre Kingdoms. Those are pretty fun. Beastmen, Warriors of Chaos, and Skaven. Ooh. Yeah, for Skaven, I still want Vermin... was it Vermin Lords? Yeah, Vermin Lords. I want Vermin Lords in Total War Warhammer 3. Kind of a shame we haven't gotten any of those yet. Oh well. So anyways, there we go. There is the video. Let me know what you guys think. What do you guys think about Warhammer Fantasy? Do you miss it? Do you like Age of Sigmar better? Are you happy that the old world is back, or do you wish they just stuck with fantasy and didn't go into Age of Sigmar? And I don't know. Just let me know what you guys think. So anyways, on that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, hit that thumbs up button. That'd be awesome. Remember, feel free to subscribe to my channel. Follow me on social media. Links in the description box below. And other than that, just stick around. More videos are on the way. And I will see you guys next time.